Welcome to the Recovery Bros podcast. This is a weekly show where two guys in recovery, myself and Doug, translate addiction and mental health science into simple systems young men can actually live through honest conversation, practical frameworks, and real world tools. What's up, bro?
What's up, bro? How you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Really good.
I got a hot question for you.
But yeah, man, I want to hear it. What's the hot question?
Do you think addiction's actually a disease? Because I have a slightly controversial perspective on this.
Oh, man, that's kind of like the question, right? Like, is addiction a disease? I think that's like the there's always like these two sides of it is, and if you don't think it is, you're harming someone, or it isn't. If you think it's a disease, you're harming someone, and it's like I think that I don't believe it is inherently a disease. No, I do not. I believe that there was real value that came when we started to classify it as a disease, right? So we were able to increase care. It was got insurance coverage, public health funding. It started to reduce moral stigma because the idea before was like this is simply a moral failure. Like if you're an addict, it's because you choose it and you can't stop it because you don't want to stop it, no matter what's happening. It's a selfish behavior, and so it helped in those things. But what I'd say is like that idea may have saved lives, but I think it has a massive blind spot, like a massive blind spot. So what do you think?
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, there's no question that once you start abusing substances or drugs, it changes your brain and it changes your body physiologically in a way that can feel like it's under attack, right? And I also agree that classifying something as a disease or as a disorder helps get people access to treatment and destigmatize certain things. I don't know if classifying addiction as a disease is helping as many people as you would think. I think it helps people to know that there's certain people that just can't stop drinking alcohol. There's certain people that just have this yearning for a substance and they can't stop thinking about it. Those
Hmm.
people, I think, have that predisposed condition of disease. But there's a lot of other factors that are at play. You know, if you talk to anyone, and most anyone I've talked to, there was some level of trauma or some level of environmental circumstances or behavior circumstances or health that mental health stuff that led to addiction. And so you have to ask yourself, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And so I think it's all of it. I think that we have to look at everything. We have to look at trauma. We have to look at behavior. We have to look at environment. Because if you just classify it as a disease, and we've talked about this before, you pretty much handcuff people and you say, you know what, like I have this disease that's debilitating and I can't do anything else. And my brain is just completely and forever hijacked. And, you know, it's the disease. And then you start to blame the disease. Like, oh, I did this because of the disease. Like, no, you did that because
Right.
you were acting like a jerk. You know what I mean? Like,
I
oh,
think
you
I
still
think
owe somebody money. I don't care what disease you have. You still owe that person money. You still stole from them. You know what I mean? Like,
I
it's
do.
yeah.
I think the big the for me the harm that it causes the person who's struggling to identify it solely as a disease is that what you're saying is the reason why you can't stop using is because you have this disease called addiction, like what you said, which also says that the reason why you're using has nothing to do with the circumstances of your life, that the lack of meaning, the lack of purpose, the disconnection from a meaningful work, from a relationship with yourself or other people, the pain that you experience daily, oh, that has nothing to do with it. That is not the problem. That will always effectively. Don't worry about that. That's not your solution or your problem. Your problem is this thing. And I think that for me, when I checked into treatment, I felt this kind of friction with the idea that I suffered from a disease called addiction. And the first kind of wake up call that I had that might be true, that it's not simply a disease, was when I listened to a TEDx talk or TED talk by an evolutionary psychologist named Doug Lisle. And for those of you who are listening who don't know who that is, he is an evolutionary psychologist who wrote a book called The Pleasure Trap, and he gives a TED talk by the same title. And in fact, we're going to have him on the show to really talk about what is this thing called addiction and the pleasure trap. And he effectively describes these internal mechanisms that inside of us we have this psychological and motivational architecture that is trying to figure out what's the right move to make, right? How to survive. But that architecture was crafted and honed into perfection over hundreds of thousands of years in a very specific environment, an environment of scarcity and competition and biological expense, right? A survival environment. And in that environment, this guidance system works really well. In fact, it's incredibly effective. It's driven by the neurotransmitter dopamine. That your dopamine neurotransmitters, they're not just pleasure chemicals, they are reward and motivation chemicals. They are motivating you and driving you to pursue things that it believes are statistically increasing your likelihood of survival. And then effectively, we have like this range of experiencing pleasure that's appropriate to our psychology, meaning it'll feel just good enough that we'll want more of it when we need it, but it won't be so great that we would risk our lives repeatedly to get more of it. It's so great that it doesn't make sense to our intermediate and long-term courses of action. In fact, the idea of what this could do to you in 5 years does not matter to you. And he gives an analogy. He gives an analogy like if you were to go outside and you were to leave your porch light on, what you would notice is that there are moths and they're attracted to the light. And the reason why they're attracted to the light is because they are actually designed by nature. They have an internal guidance system that uses the brightest lights in the sky, in fact, celestial objects, for navigation. It's how they think and feel their way into making successful decisions. But when the brightest light in the sky is now no longer the stars and the moon, when it's now an artificial stimulus, it's now your porch light, that guidance system is now fooled into thinking that this is a good direction to go. It hits the light, flutters down, hits it again, hits it again, hits it again, and then it dies. And if you were to sit out there and watch it, and you had no idea what this was, you'd go, huh, that's strange. There must be something psychologically wrong with that moth. Because I watched it hit that light and get injured. Then I watched it hit it again and again and again, knowing it was going to injure itself, and it couldn't stop doing it until it died. Then after all these other moths saw what happened, they all started, many of them started to do the same thing. All of these moths must have some kind of disease. Something must have gone wrong with them psychologically and physiologically. Why else would they do that? But if you were to pause and consider from the subjective point of view, what's actually taking place is that those moths are thinking and feeling like they're doing exactly the right thing when in fact they're destructive. By introducing that supernormal stimulus, that stimulus that was never supposed to be there, that was never supposed to exist, those moths are now always going to run the threat of making potentially harmful decisions, maybe even fatal ones, all the while thinking and feeling like they're doing exactly the right thing. They're not broken moths. They're doing exactly what evolution designed them to do in a world evolution never prepared them for. That's part of what's happening with the addictive process, is that we have this architecture inside of us that is responding as predicted to stimuli that were never supposed to be there. And it's highly attractive and highly compulsive. That's a part of it. And the other part would be what I believe Jordan Peterson and Johan Hari talk about, which is the absence of connection and meaning. Like if you isolate an individual, a human being, if you make them feel alone and purposeless and aimless, and you introduce those stimuli, well, it's a perfect response. It's a perfect opportunity to relieve the distress of feeling lonely and without meaning.
I think that what is really important as a takeaway here is that the minute you also like classify something as a disease is
Mhm.
again you take your power away. And you can't, there's like disease, it's like, wow, people are like, wow, I can't fix this, I can't cure this. When you notice it's your environment, you're like, oh, I look at like every one of the same people that's like hanging out with me, they're all doing the same stuff.
Mhm.
Maybe if I change that, my life could get better. It,
Yeah.
or your mental health, or your habits, or the way you sleep, or your stress response. Like once you can change that and make that shift, you realize that you can improve your life and you can improve the way you respond to things. And I think the pleasure trap, to me, I think where people get tripped up is people suck at embracing discomfort. I'm just going to call it out. I think people have a hard time um, embracing uncertainty and stress, and so they turn to substances and things to alleviate that in the moment. And when you do that, you convince your brain that the only way for you to deal with hard times is to check out and do something else. And so this comes with substances. And that's why I think that I don't know what the relapse rate is for specific situations, but I would imagine most people relapse, a lot of people when they're stressed out or when something doesn't go their way. So learning how to navigate that and sitting through, I just think is a really important point for understanding where these addictive behaviors come from.
Yeah, the thing is that if you were to take the average person who's addicted to drugs, and you were to ask them about their life, you were to ask them about what's going on, what you would notice is that that person would describe to you a life where they don't feel like being present is a safe, secure, and hopeful thing to do, that their life doesn't feel like a good place. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel like they can navigate it. And also, equally importantly, when they think about their future looks even worse than today. It's not a place they're interested in being a part of. They don't feel like they have the opportunity or the agency to change those outcomes. And so, obviously, that no one starts using drugs with the idea that their life gets better in 20 years, right? And so that's always the question. It's like, why would someone do that? Like, don't they know it's going to cost them? It's like, well, you have to understand for that person, to them, 10 years from today isn't somewhere they want to be a part of anyways. Like the cost of 10 years from now is fine because today is so difficult, and 10 years from now isn't somewhere they're interested in, right? And so this all starts to take place, or the story starts to take shape where you see, oh, wait, hang on a second. There's so much more about this than just a disease model. There's a lot about it that is a disease model, right? It impairs function, right? It does. It causes suffering. Absolutely. It responds to treatment 100%. So this thing manifests exactly like a disease would manifest, and it responds to treatment in the way treatment affects disease. And so being able to classify it as a disease so that the pharmaceutical treatments and psychological treatments are available and accessible and can be made better is a good thing. So I won't deny the claim that there's an aspect of addiction that looks and acts and manifests exactly like a disease and should be treated as one. I agree with that, but it isn't the whole picture. I believe it's many things going on all at the same time. I think it's disease. I think it's mismatch between our nature, our evolutionary psychology, and an environment we're not designed for. It's the lack of connection and purpose to the world around us, and it's a lack of meaning and direction. Like it's all of these things, and it's in the belief that it's just one that I think addiction becomes difficult, or addiction recovery becomes difficult.
When I think you have to look at like, what are you solving for?
Right?
I think
Yeah.
if addiction is helping you solve for community, if it's helping you solve for lack of loneliness, if it's helping you solve for peace, if it's helping you solve for less stress and less anxiety, it's like, well, wait a second. Like let's zoom out and look at this objectively. Let's like look at this in a way that's probably more effective and say, now that you understand what it's solving for, because people be like, yeah, like I love the community of people. We have fun, we do this, we, listen to music, we eat food or whatever. And, I don't feel alone. I feel like these have been my friends for years. When I get high, it helps me with anxiety. When I do this, it helps me with my stress. But you look at it and it's like, all right, like, but how is all of this and the way you're solving these problems, is it making my life better? And the
Hmm.
answer that most people will get is no, there's something that's lacking there, depending on what the trajectory of your addiction is. And a lot of times you're not even aware of it because life is just kind of good. And you're so numb to the fact to everything around you because you've been, high for so long that you don't even have any awareness. And so it's like, how do you change the way you solve the problem? The way you change the way you solve the problem is first having conversations like this where you're understanding awareness around what addiction is and what it isn't. And then it's like, okay, how can I solve for this in an effective way? I mean, you can get community and have good friends with people that aren't abusing substances. You can find a way to not be alone with people and things that aren't, wrecking your life. You can find ways to deal with anxiety and stress that don't require you to ruin your life. And by the way, there is zero, and I say zero data that suggests that any form of substance, that weed, alcohol, opiates, cocaine, Adderall, none of them have any mental health benefits as far as like reducing anxiety or stress. Like all of them long term with abuse will make your mental health a whole lot worse.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that when you look at this, it's like we're kind of we kind of have this way of being. Human beings have this nature that kind of make us highly susceptible to addiction in the modern world. Okay, like human beings, we're not just creatures of habit. We're creatures of meaning. We need a reason to get up in the morning and have something to aim at. That's important, and we tend to like to do that in a community of shared respect. Right? Humans are social creatures. In fact, it's an energy conservation mechanism to cooperate with others. We get things done better and faster if we do it with others, and it costs us less time and energy. So it's important that we're supported by a social group. So we want to get up, we want to have a reason to get up that's meaningful, and we want to aim at it. We want to do that with other people, right? We want to feel like there's a future that makes sense to us, and we also have an architecture that makes choices based on a dopamine response, right? And that dopamine response is seeking relief, right? Remember, your survival instincts, your that architecture, your survival instincts does not care about you making it to 90. It only cares about you making it to tomorrow. So it's not interested in the most logical choice for relief. It's interested in the most effective choice for relief. So if you remove meaning from a person's life, if you remove connection to others and meaningful work and social responsibility, if you remove a future that feels safe and that they want to be a part of, and you introduce stimuli that relieve them of the burden of being present with that reality, and it does it really effectively, they're going to bond with that. They're going to grab a hold of that substance with dear life because it seems like salvation, even though it's self destructive. And when asked to remove it, once they have neuro adapted, they've habituated to this drug. When if you ask them to get rid of it, to take it away, they'll go, "You have no idea what my life felt like before I started using this, and you have no idea what it felt like when I started. You can't understand the relief I got. Don't tell me this isn't good for me. You don't know me. You don't know what my life looked like. I know my life's going in a poor direction. I can see that, but I truly believe that if I could just get more of whatever this substance is, I could figure it out. Don't tell me this isn't going to work." And that's the big trap of addiction, is that the person who's struggling is wildly aware that they're struggling, but they're so confused by the immense relief that they get from their use, that because their relief looks and feels like a solution, because if it can relieve the stress, well, then they can solve their problems. But the problem is that the thing they're using to relieve their stress is creating the massive overwhelming destruction of their life. And so that's where it's like, that's the big struggle and hurdle around addiction, is that we as a human being, as an organism, are kind of wired in this modern environment to fall into a very, very dangerous place with these substances.
Well, I want to take it a step further. And if you look at some of the more common things that are abused in today's world, and I want to take a pause on opiates for a second, because I think that people who are dying from opiate addiction, they're mostly being poisoned by fentanyl. Let's make that clear, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
awful.
I think the common ones I'd like to kind of hone in on, if you look at like things like alcohol and weed, and the reason these are more tough to quit, in my opinion, is because of the community aspect that goes along with it. You know, typically when people are doing these drugs, they're with people, a bunch of people, and they're all doing it
Hmm.
together. So isolating yourself from that group to say you have a problem or you need to change can be very challenging, because then it's like, all right, how do I leave this group of people where I now am not going to have connection? And there's a level of survivor's guilt where it's like, all right, like, why am I the one that has to like leave? And what are they going to say about me? And on top of that, now you're taking away the thing. It's like you brought up the point, like, okay, what was my life like before using this substance? It's like now you're taking away the thing that was making you more social, that was making you like less stressed and easier to be around. And it's just it's tough. And I think the disease thing is the reason I have an issue with it isn't because I don't believe that some people have it, because I think there are people that are predisposed to it. It's more because I think that just addicts in nature like to be victims, and especially when they're in the thick of addiction, and they'll find any reason to say something's not their fault. And I think when you throw the word disease around, like, wait, well, it's just not my fault. Like, I'm behaving like this because of the disease. And it's like, you have to still take responsibility for picking yourself up and getting your life back together.
No, I agree. I mean, you have to ask yourself the question, well, if nothing's going to change, how do I have a life worth living? Right? Like if you want to identify that addiction as a disease and you are an addict rather than a person who struggles with substance abuse that has created disorder in your life. Like when I think about the term substance use disorder, which I think is interesting that my last name is Sud, which is substance
That's
use.
funny.
um, when you think about substance use disorder, many people think that they're describing the substance use as the disorder. I think that what its true definition is that the substance use has become so overwhelming that it has disordered this person's ability to care for themselves. And so I think that's a far more accurate description of what substance use disorder actually means. But I agree. I think that if you give a person the opportunity to identify as a victim and take a path of least resistance, they likely will. And you have to ask yourself, well, okay, if that's the direction you want to go, how do you get a life worth living, and how do you get a life where other people would feel that there's a value that you could share with them? So I think that when we think about all the kind of perspectives on addiction, the ones I resonate with the most are the people like Doug Lyle, plus Johan Hari and Jordan Peterson. And I appreciate the disease model because it makes medical legitimacy, treatment access, and it reduces stigma. But from an explanation and from a description of what's actually taking place, I don't see the disease model as being the one I would look to go, oh, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. No, I would look at Lyle and Hari and Peterson and go, oh, yeah, those were the things that were going on in my life that made it so attractive to reach for that pill and do it without stopping and feel like, well, what reason do I have to stop? It's like, Jordan Peterson said that, life is suffering is his perspective, right? And so he asked the question, not why do people get addicted, but why wouldn't they? If life has no meaning, then numbing the pain is a rational choice, right? So if you look at all those things in Johan Hari's, we should stop looking at the individual and start looking at the world around the person. Does the world around the person look like a place that would ensue wellness and mental health? Human beings have, as he says, an innate need to bond. That when they're healthy, we'll bond with each other, and when we're isolated and beaten down, we'll bond with something that gives us relief. That makes sense. I know that feeling. I felt that feeling so much every day for like 15 years. And it's like, and then I understood the pleasure trap. The why, if I want to go this direction, why is it so damn difficult to do it? Why, if I know what to do to be happy and healthy and get off this stuff, why can't I just not seem to make the right choice? There must be something wrong with my brain. Well, it turns out when you look at the data from his work, no, it's the predicted response to having a dopamine neurocircuitry habituated to supernormal stimuli. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Let those neurocircuits regain their sensitivity. Craft an environment that looks like success. Live there and live there for at least 30 days, and it will not feel like the same as it does on day one. It's like, oh, those people seem to have a really good idea. If you put them all together, that's a pretty good picture of what addiction looks like and what recovery looks like.
The other issue with the disease model of addiction is like, how do you measure? There's no real markers of like how down the rabbit hole they are. And I think if they were to find a way to do that, I don't know how you would be able to quantify like how far down the disease spectrum does this person have?
So I love that you brought this up because in order to study something, you first have to define it, right? So there has to be a definition of it. So I did a study investigating the effects of nutrition on addiction recovery outcomes. Actually, the first study to ever investigate the effects of nutrition on addiction recovery outcomes. And one of the first surprising things we found when we started to design the study is that there is no single definition for addiction. So we had to come up with one. It's like, what do you mean there's no single definition of addiction? How can we measure something that we don't have a unified definition of? Like that doesn't make sense. How can we call something a disease if there's no definition for it? That's interesting, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think that that's just something that I would love to see because I mean, I think that could, then we could kind of get towards a cure because you really don't see a cure like a medical like cure like if you look at cancer they have chemo, and if you look at diabetes they have insulin stuff, if you look at blood pressure they have blood pressure medication. Like there's all these things that can help in the interim, I mean, they have
Yeah.
Suboxone, but I don't. I mean, I think that's
No, no,
different.
you're actually going down the right trail by saying right trail by saying Suboxone. So similar to type 2 diabetes, they don't have treatments that cure it, right? They have medications that reduce the harm of the expressed symptom, right? So they can put you on metformin, which will reduce the saturation of glucose in your blood by inhibiting the production of glucose from your liver. This doesn't actually solve insulin resistance. It just reduces your risk of harm from the fact that you have a metabolic condition of insulin resistance expressed as type 2 diabetes. Suboxone is never going to cure the heroin addict, right? But what it does is it targets the symptoms so that using becomes less likely and there's greater harm reduction risk, right? So you're actually absolutely right about that. Even the fact that the treatments aren't actually treating the condition, they're treating the expression of it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you, and I think that Suboxone and other medications as treatment can be very effective. I'm a fan
But they're
of
life saving. They're life saving.
medication
Absolutely.
assisted treatment, not medication as treatment. Like I think where people kind of get themselves into a situation is that they're on Suboxone for like 10 years and they just because that
I
becomes
agree.
addictive
I
too.
think. Oh yeah, but the thing is, like, we have to first, whenever someone is suffering, and they're suffering for something that could cost them their lives, right? Someone's using any harm reduction opportunity is good and should be available. Any harm reduction, and unfortunately, this is when we talk about the addiction recovery model and actually the recovery systems that we use. I feel okay. Imagine this. Imagine a person is suffering from cardiovascular disease and they have to have they actually have to have valve replacement surgery or a double bypass. Something they have to have heart surgery, and they're in the cardiac program prepping for the surgery, and the doctor comes in and says, "Sorry, I noticed that yesterday you ate bacon, and so now you will no longer be allowed to have surgery." Right? So in the same vein, a person checks into rehab. If they use while they're in rehab, if they find out that they relapse while they're in treatment, they get kicked out. It's like, wait, you're kicking this person out of treatment because they did the thing they can't stop doing, which is why they went into treatment. So are you now calling them a moral failure? It's like, hang on a second. The industry that's defining it as not being a moral failure can't treat the person as a moral failure when they do something and then kick them out of the program. I find that to be like a huge hypocrisy.
I think the issue from the other side, and I agree with you, is that there has to be boundaries and standards when you're going into a place that is universal.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely.
I think addiction is very delicate. And I think what happens is you get somebody who brings a little bit of heroin or whatever in there, and then someone else hears about it and they're really sensitive and they're at a very critical time. And then they were like, oh my gosh. And then it's like, where do you draw the line? Like, what is the boundary? Is the boundary to kick the person out? Is the boundary to isolate themselves? What is it? Because I think I hear you, and I think that you want to be delicate with how you're handling kicking somebody out of a treatment center. And at the same time, you have to be very careful because if you don't set boundaries, people will lose respect for the treatment center. And you got to have, like, there has to be a code of, like, all right, like, there can't be any drugs in here.
I agree. And to my point though is that the whole idea behind defining it solely as a disease is to say that it isn't your fault. It isn't a moral failure. And so isn't it like by ethics, if you're in a treatment facility with a disease, you can't kick the person out for having a disease and the disease doing things. Like in
Right.
my opinion, like that seems like a it seems like a conflict of interest in the idea of to define it as that. It's like, oh, well, then you're saying there's more to it than just this thing, because if that's what they are and that's why they did it, and you're a treatment to treat the disease, you should know that that's an expected response, and you have, you know, ways to help that.
I know. I wish there was like some sort of like black and white code that was like, when you enter into treatment, I don't care what happened to you in the past. It is your responsibility to fix yourself moving
Yeah.
forward. And we're going to provide you
Yes.
the tools and the safe space, if you will, to do so. We're going to provide you with the best therapists, health and fitness. We're going to give you like lifestyle recommendations. We're going to work on trauma, pain, and it's your responsibility to get yourself out of this hole because this is just there's no other choice. Like you cannot when you're trying to change your life, the minute, whether or not like it's the right or wrong thing to do, the minute you like blame somebody else for your circumstances or something else, like you lose. You give you give all of your power away, and you don't want to do the thing because you feel powerless. And that is the thing. Like in AA, like I love the 12 steps, and we've talked about this. But like just saying you're powerless, I just think the language there, it doesn't sit well with me because you're not
It doesn't sit well
powerless.
with me either. It
You
doesn't
have
sit
you have
well with me
autonomy.
either.
You have free will. You have responsibility. I think the idea of not using substances you're abusing, I think, is great, and I think that was the idea and the meaning behind that step. But there's so many. It's just like language matters. What you tell yourself
Yes,
matters.
language matters so much. I cannot tell you how many times I use that statement, language matters, in regards to giving talks on addiction or behavior change. So, interestingly, Doug, if I was to ask you, what do you think it is? What do you think is one of the single mechanism that separates humans from every other animal on the planet?
It's language. It's the ability
That's
to
exactly
speak.
right. That's exactly right. Most people would say, oh, it's our intelligence. No, if you were to, there's examples in nature of intellect that's very close to ours, maybe perhaps even better. People would say cooperation. Certainly not. There's far more better examples of cooperation in nature. People would say love. No, we're not even close to having the same capacity for love and bonding as some of the other creatures in nature. It's accurate and articulate language. We are the only species of animal that can accurately and with extreme articulation describe what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what happened to us, and our imagination. We can describe with unbelievable accuracy something that will never exist. No other species of animal on the planet has the capacity to do that. So what I mean by that is our language is an incredible tool for us, but it's also a weapon because we can craft stories with this articulate language to define something just because we don't know what it is. And so we'll fill that gap in the map with a story. And if that story is compelling enough, everyone will believe it. And so we have to be really careful with our language. We have to be very accurate with it, especially within communities like the addiction community, where language can be very, very, very harmful or very, very helpful. And so I just, yeah, language matters a lot. And what we're talking about is not to say we don't believe that the disease model of addiction hasn't served the addicted population, but to define it solely as a disease just isn't an accurate description of what is taking place.
It's very nuanced, and I think it's done people a disservice because then you take 100% of the people that are like in the rooms, for instance, and, and everyone's then convinced that they're an addict for the rest of their lives. When maybe I don't know what the number is. Maybe it's 20%. Maybe it's 30%. Let's just say it's 50%, just to be super like liberal about it. Then now you're taking like essentially half the people and convincing them, even though they don't have this disease, that they do. And then what do they do with that? And language does, like, language can create identity. Like if you think, I look at my
Yes,
story, and the things I would tell myself when I was a kid, that I was a failure, that I wasn't good enough, that I was fat, that I was a loser, that I was never going to do this or that. Like I believed that in real time. And then, of course, I mean, my circumstances reflected that in some way, but then I began creating more circumstances that were reflective of those beliefs. And then over time, the beliefs become like your reality. And you're like, oh my gosh, well, I am a failure. I am like doing these things. And then that shapes you for the rest of your life. And if you're not careful, like that trap will just mess with you and prevent you from living a life that you actually deserve. Like if I had convinced myself that I was going to be a drug addict for the rest of my life, I would not be here talking to you. I had no idea what was going to come from my like time in jail. But it just starts with these compounding like wins and new habits in your life, and then with your self-talk changes, and then your identity starts to shift, and then you look back, and then you're able to have some self-reflection, like, wait, man, like, was I addicted to drugs, or was I just hanging around like the wrong people? Was I addicted to drugs, or was my environment just chaotic, and I needed substances to numb out? Was I addicted to drugs, or was my self-esteem just crap and I needed to check out? And then once you reflect on that, you realize that there was so much power and strength and your ability to overcome those things that will like lead to you being able to abstain from these things long term.
I mean, You said it perfectly, because if I was to look at my situation when I was using, right, grew up uh, with an incredible low self-esteem. I mean, I thought I was a worthless person. I didn't like myself physically. I didn't like myself, I didn't have any purpose. I got into a point where I was a college dropout. I had no job. I was spending money on dumb shit every single day. I was eating junk food every single day. I was using to drugs every single day in order to not feel how miserable my life was. I surrounded myself with the only people I really hung out with were the people I could get drugs from. It's like, well, so then of course the most things I would do would be using drugs, or selling them, or buying them, or stealing from people. And I remember checking into treatment, this huge fear being, oh my gosh, what if I fail at this? What if I don't like life without drug use? Like, what in the world am I going to do if that's the reality? And I remember going through treatment and being told that, if I want my life to get better, I have to stop using drugs. And I just thought, that's like such a terrible prescription for change. I got diagnosed with diabetes and heart disease and all this stuff when I checked into treatment. So if the idea was, well, if you stop using drugs, your life would get better, it's like, absolutely not. With these diseases, these conditions that I've been diagnosed with, if I look down the road, life's much worse. That really caused me to consider, is even this thing that I'm struggling with, addiction, a disease in the same way diabetes and heart disease are defined as one? It's like, well, no, hang on a minute. These are the predicted responses to the environments that I had created for myself: the caloric environment, the social environment, the professional environment, the physical environment, all of it. If you were to put nine out of 10 people in there, if you were to put 10 people in that same environment, 9 out of 10 of them would come out exactly as I did. And that's appropriate. That's what you would like. That's what should happen. So, okay, don't define myself as someone suffering from a disease. Define myself as someone suffering from the predicted responses to environments gone terribly wrong. Be the architect of a new environment that looks like one that, if I were to live there long enough, I would become someone I would like to be. If I do that, then I should do well. It's like that became my mission. It's like, I'm so glad I didn't agree with the disease model.
I think when you're trying to change any behavior, you have to look at addition and not subtraction.
Yes.
Meaning there's like yes and. With addiction, it's different because you definitely don't want to be like, yeah, you can still be shooting heroin, but just keep walking, going on walks, right? That
Yeah,
being
right.
said, you do want to make sure that you're adding in things to people's lives so they don't feel like they're losing so much. That's why I think going to meetings is actually really important, because you're
Yeah, the
taking away the
active
drugs.
replacement.
Yeah, you're adding in community, you're adding in purpose and connection with other people. You're like, okay, like you're not going to use drugs, but here's what you're going to also do to make your life better. You're going to like go on walks, you're going to do these meetings, you're going to maybe go to therapy, you might go to church, you might go to a place where you can find peace and some sense of like humility and comfort in that. And it's the same thing with nutrition. Like I tell people, the average person probably needs to eat good maybe 60, 70% of the time. And I think they're probably going to be okay. If you can eat well 70% of the time, you're doing better than like 99%
Yeah.
of the people. And that's why they'll say like the best the coaches out there, nutrition coaches, they won't tell you to just cut out stuff. They'll say, hey, let's focus on adding in more protein at breakfast. That's your habit for the next 2 weeks, because they understand human behavior. Let's focus on drinking more water throughout the day, or whatever the example is, because when you're building these habits, it's going to make you want to do more of them when you're seeing benefit. And you're starting to change your identity, where you're no longer going to need like all the processed foods, because you're now finding more ways to be satiated with protein. I know you know this because you help coach people through diabetes, but that's the way with behavior change. If you just tell somebody you can't have something, and especially when that thing has been the solution to their emotional pain for so long, they're going to look at you like you don't understand me, you don't get what I've been through, you're crazy, and they're not going to change.
Yeah, human beings have a psychology of more, right? It's why we outcompeted scarcity for 100,000 years, is because we were always trying to figure out how we can have a little bit more than we need. If we have more than we need, we win, right? So actually telling someone to stop doing something does not sit well with your evolutionary psychology and with your nervous system. You do not like that word no. You don't like less. You don't like don't. Those words do not sit well with you. This is why passive recovery models tend to not be successful. What the passive recovery model is don't use. It's like, well, what am I going to do? No, it's like, Doug, you and I didn't decide to not stand for this call. We made an active choice to sit. And so instead of saying don't use, you need to direct them towards an action that you would replace that use with. Do more of this, do more of that, right? Instead of don't eat, don't eat chocolate waffles for breakfast, right? Eat oatmeal with protein added to it. Eat fiber-rich foods. It puts your attention on the thing that if you could do it and do it well, it will change you for the better, rather than, well, just don't do that. It's like that doesn't help me at all. Telling me what not to do is not a direction.
Well, and that's why like the average standard American diet is can be so hard to change because of the protocol that's being prescribed. You're hearing a lot of people say, just only eat meat. Or you're hearing people say, don't eat any meat. You're hearing people say,
Yeah,
don't eat any processed foods. Or don't, you go in the grocery store and it has like something you can't pronounce, like you're not allowed to buy it. And the problem with that is you're taking somebody who probably hasn't changed their diet in a really long time and you're expecting them to behave like somebody who's been dieting for a really long time. And it just
right.
doesn't work. And I
Yeah.
think that you have to
That's
find,
actually a good analogy for addiction. It's like don't use. Oh, so you want me to like act like someone who can tolerate not using? I don't know how to not use till noon right now. Like the idea that I'm just gonna not use for the rest of my life. That's not a good just like instruction for change.
well, but I think the problem with addiction, unfortunately, is it is life or death with a lot of things now with fentanyl.
It is.
Like I think
Yeah.
it's not a matter of, oh, you're just
Dude,
wrecking
you
your
and I
life.
would have been dead. You and I would
Yeah.
have been dead if we were using during the fentanyl time, you
Yeah,
know?
it's like not a matter of, oh, you're not showing up to work as much as you used to, or oh, your relationships are suffering. It's like, no, you may go in the bathroom and never come out. Or somebody's going to put you in a body bag to take you out because of what's in it. So, and I also understand that it's just tough. You have to look at all these different approaches. That's why I think the conversation we're having around this is so important because it's not just like not using, it's potential, it's not using and we got to get you some help. We got to work on your trauma. We got to change your relationships. You got to change your fitness. And that's going to look different for everyone. I'm not saying that people should just overhaul their life in 24 hours, but if you have these targets and you're like, okay, like instead of like going to the bar on Friday and Saturday night or and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like, I'm going to go for a walk with a group of guys that, you know, I've heard good things about. I'm going to go try that out.
Yeah.
Or I'm
I
going to go
mean,
like
if you're
join some sort of group where you're talking about hobbies that you like. I know you and I both connect on like talking about cards, like baseball cards and stuff. And it's like something like that where you can find a hobby that helps, because I mean, when you quit drugs, I mean, addiction is like a religion. It's like, man, you do everything around that all day, every day.
the
Nothing else
entire way you
matters.
organize your whole life is what, when, and how, and where are you going to use?
You're like, all right, I have $17 in my bank account. I need like 100 to get high. I need to tell this person that story. I owe that person money. I got to find a way to work, but I kind of need to go that way to get drugs today. So I may have to call out. I mean, it's a freaking
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it's like you don't if you don't think you're a willful individual, just go reflect on how you used to act as an addict when you didn't have your drug. You are incredibly resourceful and useful and willful. Like this story that people are like, I don't know if I can tolerate, it's tough. It's like, no, you can do tough things. I think that for that person who's listening right now, if you're wondering like, do you have a disease? What's going on with you? I want you to think about it from this perspective. If you're feeling like there's something wrong with you, if you're feeling like you're a weak person who has no moral character because you know you don't want to use, but you keep using, I want you to remember that you're not a weak person. You don't have a moral failure. You're doing exactly what evolution designed you to do in a world evolution never prepared you for. It's part of the pleasure trap. Then I want you to think about what is the experience of needing to use say about what you would like to have in your life that isn't there? What meaning and purpose is absent from your life that if you had it, it would give you a reason to get up and move in that direction. I always tell people the goal of recovery is not to learn how to never use again. It's how to build a life where use is no longer necessary. So, what meaning and purpose has been absent from your life that you're missing out on? And what social environment is not conducive to the life you would like to live, right? Does the environment that you surround yourself with, your social environment, your professional environment, do those people look like your struggles or do they look like your goals? If they look like your struggles, then every time you're around them, guess what? Your struggles are the easiest things to fall back into. If they look like your goals, and maybe you're not easy, maybe your goals aren't easy to do right now, but if they look enough like your goals, they are going to encourage your opportunity to move towards them. By the nature of them doing it, you have a greater opportunity and likelihood of falling into those behaviors because the environment encourages it. Yes, understand that there is impaired function, there is suffering, and there is something about addiction that you have that will respond to treatment, and that's useful and it's important. But there's a lot more that it has to say about who you are, what you need, and what you're missing. And so use it as an opportunity to go, oh, if my life were to look a certain way, what would it need to look like where I would get up and use wouldn't be interesting to me?
As we're getting into some takeaways for people that they can like leave this on a good note, I mean, I think that what comes to me is there's a few people I could see watching our content. Specifically, this episode we're focusing on like what addiction actually is in our opinions.
Mm-hmm.
First, it's somebody that is struggling with addiction and wants to understand what they're going through. I would say it's a majority. There's probably maybe some people that are family members or loved ones that are going through it that want to learn more, or people that are also maybe in recovery. They're like, hey, like I just want to learn more about addiction. So chances are, if you're watching this and you're an individual, you got something with addiction going on. And I think the other thing to remember is you can spend so much time figuring out and trying to connect the dots of why you got to where you are now. And I think while it is important to be like, hey, my environment, some trauma, some pain, I think it's what's more important is how you're going to move forward. Because you can't fix the past. You can't go back and course correct, because sometimes they'll go back and they're like, oh, now I got to go back and fix these things, or I got to go reach out to these people and like yell at them for forcing me to make bad decisions or whatever. And I think it's a good to have an understanding and to understand like what addiction actually is and why it's so nuanced based on what we're talking about. But my advice is to gain some understanding and be honest with yourself about, hey, like I probably got some people I'm spending time with that I shouldn't be, or man, my environment right now is stressful, or I've been really lonely, so like doing this thing has helped me, whatever it is. And then try to find the path forward that works for you so that you're not in this rat race that most people stay in, which is, I'm addicted. I don't know if it's ruining my life that much, but I definitely don't feel good. But hey, the pain isn't like a level 8 or 9, it's a level 4 or 5, and it's okay. It's manageable. And then it's like, oh, it gets to a place where it's like level 7 or 8. I'll stop for a little bit. Now my life's back to good. Let me like go back. And and it's just this cycle
Yeah.
that people just play
If
out.
you're
Yeah.
if you're running that cost benefit analysis, that's evidence that perhaps it's time to choose a different direction.
Any closing thoughts from you?
I would say, I think that the point of this conversation was not to make a statement that we're saying addiction either is or isn't a disease. It's our belief that the disease model doesn't paint a picture that is accurate enough to describe what happens and what is happening for people who are struggling with addiction. That it's more than just this idea that there's this disease process happening in your brain, that there's biology, there's environment, there's neuroplasticity, there's connection and meaning, and all of these things are absolutely equally important. The reason why I think the disease model is important is simply because of access to care, not as a definition for what addiction is, but as access to care and opportunities to increase care and the quality of care. But to say that it's just that is wildly inaccurate in creating an understanding of what is happening for people. So for those of you who are listening, please comment below in this episode. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know which part of this resonated with you. Let us know how you feel. Do you feel like the things that we talked about, Did they describe things that are going on in your life or that you are missing in your life? Right? Doug and I are speaking from experience as people who are in long-term recovery from substance use, and so when are sharing our thoughts and our feelings, we are relating them to our lived experience and from what the views of really intelligent people have had to say about it. And so we also want to know what you have to say.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Comment below with your biggest like takeaway, or if you want other topics for us to cover in the future.